Huge game for United this weekend, Manchester Derby, and with the very compelling subplot of another new manager, another wholly different approach to what we've been used to for the most of the last 14 months. Michael Carrick takes the reins, and I brought analyst Nik Storey onto the channel just to explain to us what we can really expect to see from him. He's had 3 games in charge previously, back in 2021, great record. But obviously, he's had 3 years since then at Middlesbrough, and just wanted to see if there's any hints from that time as to what we can expect and how he's going to shape this United squad in his own image between now and the end of the season. So, Nick, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Steve, yourself?
Yes, not too bad, not too bad. Never a dull moment here. All good.
Well,
Um,
United.
isn't it just? So yeah, I mean, talk about a baptism of fire. City at home, Arsenal away. City are doing very, very well. They've obviously signed, sad to say, your favourite player, Semenyo, who has hit the ground, not so much running as, full blown Sonic the Hedgehog. Off he goes. Top player, gives City a new dimension, and they weren't exactly short on bodies anyway, were they? So we'll come to how we're going to sort of approach this weekend's game, because that's a beast in itself. But generally speaking, given Michael's appointment, I suppose generally, how do you feel about that? And what do you know of his style, his approach? Because obviously it's been a huge talking point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what City have done, as you've just said, by the way, changing their full 11 in the last, I think it literally is from last January to this, and that's just shows you what the league is up against, never mind Manchester United. And then they've gone out and just bought Semenyo just as if that was the natural course of things, the natural proceedings. Incredible, really. At a time when we're looking for a left winger, as came out in the last 48 hours. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But in terms of Carrick, we touched on the last pod or two about what the board's thinking might be, and you've got to say it's despite all the kind of husband and the kind of hullabaloo about this recruitment strategy in terms of managers, it seems to be the right call on two fronts really. One, why would you go directly to the long-term appointment now mid-season when we discussed obviously the issues and quite a few problems that Amorim suffered by doing the very same, and not to mention the fact that we've got a whole host of managers coming available in the summertime. So it wouldn't make sense in my view, and I think yourself, Steve, as well, to just suddenly go out having, sacked Tamarim, albeit kind of spontaneously, although there was obviously the results leading up to that now infamous Friday meeting before Leeds. Why would you go straight away and then say, as much as these managers may want to come to us, an Emery or whoever, you're not going to, and I use Emery as an example from another Premier League club, you're not going to every single day of the week pull them over to Manchester United. It's not a given anymore. So the right call in terms of an interim. And then I think we've had a good chat around Fletcher, Carrick, and Solskjaer and the pros and cons of each. And I was Carrick from the beginning, and I do believe it's the right choice by the board. It's the character, it's the principles of play, it's the fact he's had high level managerial jobs already with some amazing work at Middlesbrough, despite the last few months of his reign there tailing off a little bit, let's say.
You touched there on obviously his time at Middlesbrough. Stylistically, what should we expect from him in terms of how he'll line up formationally and what he likes to do? Obviously, he was known as a player who loved the ball, but also was brutally efficient with it at times. It was all about good decision making, tempo control. Does his team reflect him as a player?
I think so. I think there's a couple of things going around on that, isn't there? There's this idea that if it matches and mirrors Carrick's style as a player, are we in for, the passing sideways and backwards of the Louis van Gaal era? And I don't think it's quite that, to be honest with you. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a Middlesbrough expert. That's not the case, but we certainly know what Carrick is about. And there's a few things that actually elevate him above that kind of trope that's going around at the moment. I think, if we get anywhere near, a central midfield or composition that reflects Carrick and his style back in the day, we're on to a winner because certainly one of my favourite ever central midfielders for Manchester United. But I don't think it's as dull and boring as some fans are saying, and some Middlesbrough fans to the end of his tenure. Let's not forget, in three of those seasons at Middlesbrough, he ranked the highest in each season for XG, for chances created, for shots on goal, and that takes some doing. So it's actually quite the opposite of random circulation, if you like, and limited rotations, less verticality through the pitch, through the middle. I actually think it's the opposite of that when we study what Carrick was about. And that's really, really intriguing, isn't it? Especially given this idea of the United DNA and the United way. However, what I would just finish by saying there is if it is about possession and it is about keeping that ball, certainly in that we call it the 3-2 in the first build, and then the central midfielders coming low like we've really craved under Amorim and we've talked a lot about on this channel. And if it is keeping the ball away from the opposition and having over 50%, maybe not this weekend, then that's a good thing given our defensive fragility at the moment. So let's hope it's a bit of both. We can talk a bit more about the detail that Carrick goes into with his coaching staff. Um, and yeah, I think it's going to surprise a few people, and it's a shame that there's a baptism of fire in a way, although that might bring the best out of us, and we'll come on to that. But very exciting about Carrick-Ball, definitely.
So all things being equal, if you zoom out and look at the squad and everyone's fit, let's pretend everybody's fit. How does an idea, and obviously also don't bring the opposition into it because naturally the lineup against City away or City at home would be markedly different to playing, West Ham at home in a few weeks or West Ham away in a few weeks, should I say. So zooming out, what does the Michael Carrick 11 look like made up out of this squad, in your opinion?
So yeah, before we might, go into, incredible specifics, shall we say, in terms of, who that might be, you've got to look at Carrick's principles of play, his philosophy of coaching, and what that might hint at. So I think the first thing to say is that he is, traditionally a 4-2-3-1 coach. It's something we've been wanting this season, of course, and I know that was latter day Ferguson as well, when he tried to develop that approach, especially when Veron came in. Um, and it certainly wasn't always 4-4-2 under Fergie, and it started there is effectively what I'm trying to say. And that is, has become the Manchester United way. You can talk about flat back four and back three, not making a huge difference. Is about the way you actually, circulate the ball, progress through the thirds. What are the zonal instructions? Is it man for man? What's your outer possession shape like? But the crux of the matter does remain that 4-2-3-1 does suit the current squad of players, in my view, and probably the majority of others. So I think what we can expect is, like you said earlier, is that central midfield build that harks back to his career, of course, that control of the football, but doing it in the way that takes calculated risks once it's in that middle zone, and then speeding up the tempo as we get into the final third. And that often translates, funnily enough, as like a 3-2-5. So when we start the build, you've got one fullback going quite high. We'll all potentially remember the name Giles, that wonderful left back in the Championship who had great success under Carrick. I think that there's a stat there that he had over 100 crosses more than the next fullback in the Championship in that season where they made the playoffs. I think they finished fourth in that season. So we're going to see a Shaw or a Dallo or a Dogo or Mazraoui, depending on the game. One of those is going to be lopsided. One of them is going to be providing width. So yes, in the first phase when it's played into the central midfielder, but then the second phase as well, they're going to be on that front five, if you like, providing the high width from the full back area, and then the opposite side of that, where in this instance um, it could be Ahmad on the right side, for example, if not Mbumo, providing width in a natural way where that winger is asked to provide natural width. The left side, if we take Shaw as an example from the full-back position, you'd have Cunha or Bruno, whoever's playing that kind of left side, coming quite deep into the pockets and then creating those triangles with the full-back and with Sesko or AN or the number nine. So that's the first thing to say. And then it's a question of how do we do that? How do we provide the players, the personnel to have central dominance, to be at ease on the ball in the centre of the field, to bring in the number 10 and create 3-on-2s, to bring in your 7 and 11, depending on which way you're attacking, and create those rotations and then triangles with the likes of Sesko at 9 and getting beyond that final line. There seems to be a real impetus with Carrick's style about the 10 or the 11 or 10 and the 7 on this side, getting beyond the number 9 and creating plenty of chances and shots on goal.
You touched there on the midfield area, just to offshoot for a second. The notion of Carrick and Casemiro working together is lovely, isn't it? Because if you look back at Ruben's time, you could argue that not many players improved under him, but one who really did have kind of a new lease on life in midfield in the Premier League was Casemiro, which is bizarre and really counterintuitive given just how experienced and generally excellent he is. Been there, seen there, done it, won it. How would you see his role under Michael Carrick?
I think initially, I mean, he has to play, I think is the first thing. But we were a little surprised with Fletcher's resting of him in such a crucial FA Cup game. So I think he's in. That's the first thing for City. Um, whether he stays in again will just depend on how he does in this. It will be a bit of a new role for him. So I suspect he'll be that classic Carrick style, the six, if you like, the DCM that hasn't worked out for Ugarte, if we're being truthful. And you do fully expect a Casemiro in there, just in front of, I don't know, when everyone's fit, a De Ligt and a Martinez or a De Ligt and a Euro, and demanding the ball. So as the fullback goes high, the back three then sorts itself out in a sense, whether that's Shaw or Dallo tucking in alongside the two nominal centre backs, and Casemiro then will drop to make that kind of a 3+1, and then it's a question of where do we go? Is it to the ambitious fullback in the first phase of build, or is it then to the carrier, which will be, a number 8 in the format of a Kobe Mainu or an Emmanuel Ugarte, or it could even be Bruno Fernandes. Maybe not this weekend, but you could see that re-emergence of the Casemiro and Bruno double pivot. So I think Casemiro sits in. Whether he stays there again will depend on a whole host of factors and whether he's got that commitment, that kind of discipline to do so. Because we have seen him moving forward, moving to that right zone, playing those now infamous, Casemiro looping balls over the top into Mbumo's channel and Ahmad's channel. So it's not given that Casemiro sits in, but I think we will see that City in the future. That might be, somebody obviously coming in, but if not, he might work on Ugarte. I mean, he certainly needs the work. He certainly needs Carrick in his ear, the Uruguayan. Um, and I'm not sure it'd be Kobe. I personally don't have an issue with Kobe at 6, but I think he's the one who's seen by Carrick to be on that second line of midfield. Sorry, it's like a second approach, shall we say, in the same line, and then carrying the ball forward and working with the 10 and the 7 or the 10 and the 11.
So how do you see it going this weekend? How do you see I suppose, the personnel and also the approach? Is he going to play it as safe as possible because God knows we need to really shore up at the back and stop all these daft concessions. You know, 2 clean sheets in a season plainly isn't the standard. And that's something that he's renowned for, that solidity at the back a little bit. Or does he, I don't know, platform himself and his football intellect and go, right, I'll go toe to toe with Pep Guardiola in my first game. Personally, I would not expect that, but just what are your thoughts on it?
I think, to be honest with you, it's a great question. I think it's going to be somewhat of a hybrid of those two approaches. I think he's not going to be afraid. I think that's one thing everyone likes about Carrick. He's certainly, though calm demeanor, he's speaking his mind. He's got his philosophy. He's quite stubborn in that, and not, in the Ruben way, so to speak, but maybe not as rigid. So I do think we will see some Carrick-Ball already. We've seen the clips of the training today. We've seen him out there with Steve Holland, which I think is a really astute signing, by the way. And Carrick obviously knows him via some connection. And I think we will see some of that, but at the same time, some caution. That idea of we talked in the last pod about round pegs in round holes and ensuring that everyone knows their duties. So straight away, you've got a question at the back. If we say obviously Le Mans is in goal, straight away you've got the question. Yoro and Heaven, though fantastic on their day, seem to be undergoing a bit of a transition, season, if you like, whether that's a mentality issue. They've certainly got the talent and the potential. And we noticed that Maguire obviously got some minutes in the last time out. So um, I wouldn't be surprised to see Harry Maguire come back at right centre back this weekend. Whether that again is it next to your traditional Martinez, who's going through a similar rough patch, not maybe quite as a concern as the other two we just mentioned, but that would probably be one of the questions. Then he's got the question on the fullbacks, of course. Does he go Shaw back in, which I'm minded to think he will do because he provides excellent width. Of course, that's fitness notwithstanding. And then we've got the idea of Dallo, which probably he's going to start with. Normally, you might look at Mazraoui, as we've just mentioned, but Dallo is going to be, starting at right back. And again, there'll be this kind of lopsided approach, but Dallo's more than happy to stay in a rest defence as we're attacking and sit in with Maguire and Martinez. So I think they're the two key options at the back. And then, of course, there's a whole host of fun, if you like, a lot of combinations and questions for that final third in particular for him.
Well, as you said, there's at least some options coming back now with the AFCON panning out the way that it has. We've got, sadly, I was going to say two players in the same position, but that was under Ruben, wasn't it? For the right 10, ideally. So how do you see Ahmad and Mbumo reintegrating? Is the room still in the same side for both?
Yeah, I think there is, and as we've just alluded to, in the strongest side, you're gonna have to play them both actually, in terms of the strongest side, not necessarily this weekend where there's some tiredness potentially from the long distance travel. But we've mentioned there already the likelihood of Ahmad coming in inside potentially or playing left side, giving Mbumo that width on the right side, which we've been craving for all season, certainly in our chats, and profiling him in the way Brentford did, in transition, coming off that right side, getting close to Sesko, but as the ball is moving, as we're moving into that final third. And there's no reason why Mbumo can't play that second striker like Hamad too as well. So there's going to be a whole host of options for Michael behind Sesko. Mbumo can always play number 9 as well if Sesko is to be rested. And we know Michael's very fond of that kind of shorter, faster, pacier number 9 to the point where he even brought Akpom a bit deeper into the 10 role from a traditional 9, and he played behind the smaller striker number 9 and played close to him and then got beyond him. So we're going to see a lot of that kind of second striker approach as well. This weekend, I don't know. Shall we get into it and have a look what might happen?
Absolutely. Walk me through it.
So yeah, looking at the potential lineup on Saturday, we've already talked about some of his key dilemmas. This is something that could potentially happen. Again, there's so many variables. We don't know how many, players are actually in full training, whether Mbeumo or Ahmad have come back with slight knocks, for example. There's still talk of Bruno's hamstring. So this will be an interesting one. I think that one of the key questions, as we alluded to, will be Cunha's role, and is he going to be the one who starts? I would suggest that if he didn't, Michael's he made a rod for his own back in terms of Cunha's character, in terms of his intentions every game, and that passion and commitment to play. That's why I suspect we probably will see him despite some of his patchy form. And I think we'll see him here in this kind of left. It's like an interior 11 in a 4-2-3-1. It's no longer like a left 10 in a 3-4-3. But we'll see him in similar areas of the pitch to which Ruben profiled him. And then he can come inside. There's obviously, cause for Bruno and Cunha to interchange positions if need be, like we saw at Burnley. But generally speaking, I think he'll be coming off that left side, and that provides obviously room for Shaw to come and provide that width on the kind of fourth or fifth line, depending on the phase of play, which will be interesting. This is where you're going to get this kind of triangle approach, lots of rotations. That leaves Bruno a chance to come in if Sesko's going to hold it up, Sesko to come over and Bruno to come into his spot. So that provides lots of opportunity on the left. Martinez will naturally come over, Maguire will hold the centre, and Dalot tucked in. So that's something of the shape we've come to expect, the kind of 3-5-2, if you like, when we're building with the football. Now, this will be City. In general, we've already said we'd like to see Cunha a bit closer to Sesko, and in future we might see something more like that, which will really bring out, hopefully, will bring out the form we know the Brazilian has, and that eye for goal, and the 1-2 on the edge of the area, the breaking lines, and it focuses his area and attention in the right area of the football pitch, which is there in and outside the penalty area. On the right side, I think we'll see Ahmad, or we might see Mbeumo, of course, and that'll be holding the width on the right side, this kind of lopsided approach that Carrick prefers. And Mainu again will be the carrying eight to come over, interchange with Ahmad. Again, Sesko will be involved if we're getting this area of the final third, leaving Bruno again to come over. So you've got lots of rotation opportunities here. And Casemiro in that kind of Carrick role we discussed, just sitting in front of what would then be a back three. I think it's also important just to say it's not too much of a similarity to Ruben Amorim's approach with talk of a back three. It's very much similar to a Ferguson, a back four there with one fullback going. I mean, you and I will remember, Steve, that'll be Dennis Irwin. That later became Patrice Evra, and Gary Neville would sit in on this side. Paul Parker would often go, and Dennis Irwin would sit in. So it's not too dissimilar to that, but there is a bit more space in between the lines, and there's a bit more, let's say, build in this area of the pitch, just in front of the back four. And then what we want to see is balls into the tens, and then out wide for this guy to get involved, or Mbeumo, and then balls in where we can start to hit the box. This is something we saw from the outset with Fletcher, not so much in the Brighton game, but something we know we can do. And I think Carrick's, if you like, instruction will be to, yes, build slowly, but then when we get into that final third, let's get the verticality going, the up, back, and through approach, if you like, which is common in most elite teams. It's getting the ball up, it's held up by Sesko, it's then coming back into a Bruno or a Mainu, and then it's through for a wide player to break the lines. So that's something I think we'll see. It's certainly something we're going to, look to make the best opportunity of, given City's issues. So despite them doing, well overall this season and still a big chance of the league title. In recent games, there's just still some counter-pressing issues that they've come up against. This is part of the Linders 4-1-4-1 that they've started to play out this season. And although they still have lots of possession, often over 60% of the ball as usual, they're kind of, retreat, so to speak, and that before they get into the low block. So this is often from a very disparate rest defense as they're attacking. They're very slow to get back into that low block, and that's where we can cause them real issues just by going very direct into Sesko, up back and through. Ahmad and Cunha coming in or Mbumo, getting beyond the number nine, and that's where we can have a real threat. So I'm not saying by any stretch we're going to score lots of goals. We're the favourites, no, but absolutely not. They're still the favourites for this game. But let's give them something to think about.
Like, obviously, there's two teams involved. It never pays to second guess how Pep will approach, his breakfast, let alone a Manchester derby. But how would you, if put on the spot, how would you imagine they will approach Saturday's game?
Yeah, I mean, and he's got a couple of decisions, hasn't he? The back four is struggling at the moment. You've got your injuries to Stones, Diaz. But I have to say the Kuznov fella seems to be doing a lot better now. I think he's likely to start. You're probably going to see O'Reilly come back to fullback. He's been playing in a DCM role of late. On the other side, you've got the option, you've got Ake maybe, you've got Ricardo Lewis. So the back four is definitely up for debate. And that's another reason why we just need to be a bit bold and not forget, like you said, there's two teams in it, right? So we can, they're coming to Old Trafford. Let's give them something to think about. And certainly a Sesko and a Cunha or an Ahmad going at that kind of soft centre is something to look at. Which then brings me on to the fact that probably Rodri is going to be brought back in after a long time out, but he's got some minutes in the last 2 to 3 games. So I think he'll be the one sitting in front of the back four. That they'll want him in, the great form that we know he can be in. He's such a lovely deep line playmaker and lovely diagonals, lovely, quick momentum passing, that like metronome, if you like, very underrated in terms of his actual passing intention and his progressions of the ball. So that's clearly something to worry about. And then again, they've got the the pick of the bunch up front. I mean, there's so many things they could do. I suspect it'll be Bernardo right side rather than central. You've got the likes of, Foden, Reinders, and Cherki looking for, two spots. The three of them will be vying for that. If he's clever, he'll probably go Cherki because, as we saw with the goal against Newcastle the other night, he's so adept at finding the pocket, that kind of inside half space. 1-2, as we saw with Semenyo, and then the overlapping eight Nori, of course, who's just come back. And then Indy went for the 1-2 and scored a brilliant goal. I'd probably be going Shirky over Reinders, but Pep might show us a bit of respect there. We don't know. And then, of course, I think it'll be Semenyo left side, which really scares the life out. I mean, whether it's Doku or Semenyo, to be honest, especially with Dallo in lackadaisical mood, and that does surprise, does scare me, and especially then if he's getting beyond and playing those balls into Haaland. So that's certainly something we've got to look out for. And if it is Ahmad right side high, he's got to be protecting Casemiro, Kobe, and Dallo, and potentially we'll see Ugarte at some point to help in that manner.
Given me a bit more confidence than I had going into the game. So that's actually that kind of works the other way because with expectation, now you've heightened my expectation, which means that he won't deliver. So I need to go back to where I was. But anyway, that's just me and my approach to how I consume United these days. Um, Nick, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you again after the game. Hopefully, we are dissecting just how you called the downfall of Pep Guardiola and with three
I'll
points
take a
closer
draw
to where we
now.
want to be. Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Steve.